That was a really great conversation, you guys. Good job.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
That was fun.
Sorry we got so heated.
No, but that's what makes it good.
Good.
I kept wanting to jump in because I was like, oh my God. And I was like, no, you guys got it coveed.
No, that's a really good sign.
I'm not sure people will understand that it was you who said Yahoo.
I know. Well, it was just like, no, I'm sorry. In America, a company cannot long survive when it's only.
Well,
when
Yahoo is doing fine. It's not growing, but it's
No, it's not doing fine.
I know what Patrick means. Like,
wait, Veronica, wait a second. Stop laughing for a second.
No, wait,
Yahoo.
don't interrupt Veronica Belmont. Not do it. Not on Mondays.
Okay, go
Oh, snap.
Is there something you were gonna say?
Yahoo's a shit show.
Yes, and I will
Yahoo.
personally verify that as a former employee, that there are a lot of people at Yahoo very worried right now because their only source of value is entirely wrapped up in owning something else's stock. And the moment you take the stock away from the value of the company has zero value, even though what I would say is true, that it still has a very large user base compared to other things on the internet, and it does a good job at what it does.
Yep.
All right. Can I speak now?
Yes.
Am I authorized to open my mouth?
Yes.
You capitalistic censors? No, I mean, this is what we're completely in agreement, actually. I think we're saying the same thing, just looking at it from a different point, from a different angle. Monetarily, it is in danger, obviously, and it's not doing well at all. But you said it yourself, Jenny. It's still providing the service that it was providing before, and it still has a lot of users. So the comparison I'm doing with Twitter, it's obviously two very different things, because Yahoo has gotten into media, it has gotten into different areas, and it has left its core business of indexing the internet pages from a long time ago. But it is still performing the service it was performing before, and whether or not it is doing well financially doesn't change the fact that it's performing that service. So let's say Twitter never grows ever again, it is still going to remain Twitter and perform that service.
I don't even understand what you mean. Like, I don't like it. Just because they're still providing a service doesn't make them a company that's functioning or making profit or satisfying their investors or their shareholders. Like, in order to be a successful company, you have to do these things also, as well as provide and iterate on your service.
Well, if you're confusing growth with viability. Growth is continued success. It doesn't mean you stop functioning if you're not growing.
What does that mean?
Twitter
not
does
continue to function. That doesn't mean those words don't mean anything in terms of business.
Of course they do. Of course. No, I'm not talking about business. I'm talking about the service. Twitter.
Their service is a business.
Allowing you to tweet things that reach other Twitter users. Let's say Twitter, has 500 million revenue and 50 million profit until the end of the day.
I can write a script to do that. That doesn't make me a successul business.
I don't care about the fact that they're a successful business. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm asking whether or not whether or not us as users who aren't stockholders and investors, do we care that the stockholders are making lots of money and wanting to sell or buy Twitter stock?
But we should care, because if they don't make money, we don't get to use Twitter anymore.
That's a different conversation.
No, that is the entire conversation. That is like, if they are going to succeed and remain a company, a viable business that employs people and provides a service and a product, they have to show growth and make money.
I think the thing that's coming in between the two of you is an assumption about whether continued growth for growth's sake is the only thing that matters in a company. And where I start to take issue, and where it does become going down the rabbit hole of Wall Street good or bad, is when I see people flip out about Google not having continued growth because they didn't exceed their previous quarter's numbers, or Apple not having it. And that's when I get a little queasy about it. Because, I am not sure there is still a market for what Yahoo does past the people who are still using it by default. And I would argue that Twitter's value is overstated by you, Patrick, because it's still useful to you, but it's not necessarily becoming useful to anyone else at scale.
Well, I'm not 300 million people. There are 300
Right, I
million
know,
people
but those
using it.
300 million people will continue to diminish fairly rapidly when their children
Why?
teach them about Instagram. Like,
Well, but maybe okay. If you know, then if the user base diminishes, then I agree. It is going to be an issue. But if there is a viable user base that the company can make money off, I don't see why it means that the service is going to go away.
You're asking, can Twitter just be a small, successful business?
Yes. And you know, with quotes, because 300 million, I don't think it's small.
But that's actually a legitimate question, which is, when is it okay? Nobody expects a small business in America to have 300 million users. Like, that would be no longer a small business, right? But when is it okay for Twitter to be like commoditized? Like, it's just now it's a commodity and it's not expected to grow at some weird exponential rate. I totally am down with that. That's like a different tangent, but the idea of a company being for social good instead of for profit, or a company just being for, like, it's useful. But I don't know if that's the goal Twitter's going for.
But even if they make, you know, 50 million profit, it's still a sizable amount of profit.
I mean, for
it's
you.
not for social good. Yeah, well.
But not
me,
necessarily
yes,
for a media company.
No, okay. Yeah, I agree. But you know, it doesn't mean that the service. There are lots of services that don't make 50 million profit. I don't even know if they make that much profit. But let's say they do. There are lots of companies that don't make that amount of profit, right? That don't make millions of profit. It doesn't mean they go away, or it doesn't mean they're bad businesses.
Yeah,
Does it?
That's sort of the American capitalist quandary.
Yeah, but regardless of ideology, they could exist, you know, making a little bit of money.
So what the problem is here is that unless, as we mentioned, unless you're Steve Jobs, you can't go back. I mean, they have predictions, they have goals they have to accomplish. They cannot go back in time and say, okay, we're not going to grow, we're just going to continue to plateau. There's no plateauing in this scenario. Like, that is not going to work. Like, that is how the business of things is done, and they can't plateau at this point. Jack he has to improve. He has to grow. That's why things are so crazy right now and why there's so much turnover, because there's so much pressure on these executives to make a product that continues growing and iterating. And that's why we're talking about this at all right now.
Yeah, no, I understand this, but let's say he fails and Twitter, for the sake of argument, gets bought by, I don't know, Google, Amazon, whoever, News Corp. And, you know, it becomes a little toy that they have, and they're happy with the whatever 50 million revenue profit it's bringing in, and they're happy with the service as it is. And
well, you know, then that's going to be seen as a huge failure on Jack's
Sure.
part. It's going to be seen as one of the biggest technology failures in history.
I agree.
So.
I agree, but Twitter wouldn't go away.
Maybe.
Right? I mean, it could go away as well, but it could still
Yahoo before I answer that question. I guess we have to see what happens to Yahoo before I answer that question about Twitter.
Not really. Yahoo could fail, and again, it's not the same kind of technology. There is no other Twitter. There is one, type of social network that works exactly like Twitter. There have been others that have tried to do it. They've failed. And what that says to me, the fact that Twitter is still here and that it has a stable 300 million users, is that there is a certain amount of people that do want to use a service like this. All right, I'm not convincing anyone here.
Well, I think you're all right. I think that what happens with Yahoo will be slightly informative about Twitter if it happens soon enough. But Patrick's right; they are different companies, so it's not predictive. And I think that what we're dealing with, I think what I'm taking from what Patrick's saying is, a company can be perfectly useful and valuable into itself to its users, and have wildly different values on the stock market. And I think Veronica's absolutely right that if Twitter doesn't continue to outperform its IPO value, it'll be seen as a huge failure by its investors. So you can be an Instagram and you can sell for $1 billion and be seen as a success because you returned value, or you can be, something that got sold for parts and was dismembered. There was recently a social network that happened to, where like basically they sold it for the technology and the staff. So the question to me is, which road is Twitter going to go down? I think I think maybe this is what you're responding to a little bit, Patrick, is the idea of Twitter being a failure seems unreasonable given how useful it is for 300 million people. And so you're like, well, it's not going to fade away, right? Unless they just stopped making it or they did something to undermine what makes it valuable now. So is it important for us to have our tools driven into some huge growth thing when they could just be perfectly sustainable, useful tools? And is there a place for that?
Yeah, ideally, yes, it would keep growing, as I was saying, and every company would grow until, until it explodes. No, but every company would grow until they become incredibly successful and valuable. I'm just wondering if the only two options are grow to infinity or fade to oblivion, or if there is a way to make a business that is just good and works and has its users and has a revenue and has profits. And that's what it is. And
look
maybe
at things like ask.com that are still around.
Yeah, but that's not 300 million users, is it?
I don't know how many users they have, but it's, IAC still runs it.
Dropbox, for example, I'm not sure it's still growing immensely. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm mistaken. But let's say it wasn't.
Is growing, yeah.
Dropbox is fine.
But are they growing?
Yes, they are. I don't think they're your best example.
Okay, let's say they weren't. Would that be considered a failure? Let's say they had, 500 million users and they weren't growing anymore.
Let's give an example where it's growing and has a huge user base and is still becoming a failure, like Reddit.
Yeah.
Like that company may not always be around because they're having major problems internally with their, the people who are running the company and with profitability, and that is a product that is growing hand over fist and yet still might not be sustainable.
And both of them have the same problem, which is they're having trouble controlling the very thing that makes them great, which is the complete freedom of speech is running into the consequences of complete freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Pat, I'll say this much just from my experience from my last startup that Veronica knows very well. Part of the issue is who gives you your initial funding and who your paymasters are. Now, if that switches over time, where there isn't a overriding concern for double-digit returns on whatever money they put into it, yeah, you're going to be, you can be a little more relaxed. But if you've been invested in by, say, a certain class of VC money, there's an expectation for you to kind of have this sort of meteoric rise in terms of the quote unquote value of your company. And I agree with you. You can have a sustainable business that makes enough money that it covers overhead, and then you still have a nice, net profit on the side. But unfortunately, it depends on what part of the ocean. I guess the best analogy, what part of the ocean you're swimming in. Some parts are very conducive to that. Other parts are like filled with sharks, and the people fishing in those waters really want high returns for the money they put in.
I understand how startups work. I understand how the world of VCs and investment and Silicon Valley and Wall Street works. I'm not completely oblivious to all of this. I'm not an idiot. I'm just, and I understand that if you don't achieve certain goals that your investors are expecting you to achieve, then you become worth less business-wise and financially. I'm just thinking about, anyway, we're running in circles now. But it's like if you open a restaurant with your parents and you're like, selling tacos, and the neighborhood is enjoying your tacos, and you're selling the tacos every day, and you have tacos.
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 Taco.
Tacos.
Oh, but
Pizzas.
big
It's
taco.
Lagos, but taco.
You know what's interesting, Pat, is I also can identify with that because my parents do run a restaurant, but we don't
Well,
sell
Wait
it.
for that one.
And I understand what you mean. I mean, their business has basically seen 3 generations worth of competitors go by the wayside over the past 25 years. And they don't make money hand over fist, but it still runs, and it still makes a small amount of profit for the operation. But I guess I think part of what you're trying to get at is how do you define success? How do you define a successful business? Does it need to have? Is it how much money you bring in and how much more you bring in the subsequent year, or is it B, how long the business can run meeting all its obligations to its employees while providing a decent product that everyone enjoys and have enough money to keep running the business year over year?
Well, a lot of it has to do with expectations.
Yeah.
If Twitter had been started like Craigslist and said like, all we're going to do is 140 character messages and this is what we're going to do and that's it and we're not going to go public, that would be a whole different set of success metrics than Twitter, which said, hey, we're going to IPO and we think we're worth this many millions of dollars. And hey, and venture capitalists, we think we can grow on this curve. And what's happening is they are not meeting those expectations.
Yeah. No, I understand. I think this is the biggest cultural divide conversation I've ever had with anyone in my life. And I've spoken to many different people. But I'm not even talking about success, the beginning of the conversation was, can Twitter exist if it doesn't grow? And I think maybe it can. It would be a failure.
Absolutely it can. I think the fact that it is still growing and still used as much as it can means it can. I think part of the cultural gap is in the United States, if you don't succeed, people stop working on you. So one of the dangers Twitter could face is that if they don't hit those heights, then people start to see them as a failure, even though maybe they're not technically a failure, and people quit, people leave, which is why 4 executives leaving can be disturbing. And so a product that if it had lots of people who believed in it, continuing to work on it, could be totally sustainable, will suddenly have no one willing to work on it because everybody wants to work on growing properties. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's kind of what happened to Friendster and MySpace to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm. Good conversation, guys.
Yes, I agree. And I'm out of the post. So we're gonna shut this down.
Pick a title? Don't we have to pick a title?
I just picked it. I didn't want to interrupt. It was too good.
What did you pick?
Twitter executives migrate. Because
I
the bird, the tweet, the thing.
That's cute.
Ah, right.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Maybe Lamar and I will fight about capitalism.